Alright, soft lads and no marks. What's tickling me this week? Well, I'll tell you what. Brookside is back. Not as it turns out in the form of a new series. I think Brookside, it kind of knew when to stop in a way. It ceased in 1990. No, sorry, in 2003. Having run since 1982. I think, an avid fan as I was, I think my interest had probably dropped off by within a couple of years before it ended. So the makers of Brookside, I guess you could argue, knew when to stop. I mean, there has been talk of reviving it. I think to justify that, they would have to have it very together. They would need very, proper, strong storylines and, a good cast, and hopefully to be able to draw from some of the old-time stalwarts. But that's pie in the sky at the moment. However, the archive of Brookside episodes from the very first one, so that's the autumn of 1982, and I'm old enough to remember that, they are going up on STV's platform, so you can binge. I think they're loading maybe 5 or 10 episodes a week are getting loaded up on there. I had a little splurge with them last week. I was there as a watcher, as a viewer from the beginning. I mean, I remember tuning in Channel 4 when it launched. Brookside was one of its flagships, and it seemed so exciting. I was of that age then when you wanted to feel that, having been used to 3 TV channels, and that's not to say there hadn't been good television during my childhood, but you kind of wanted something to rattle against the sort of middle ground and the conservative broadcasting establishment at that point. And Channel 4 obliged with programmes that I suppose you felt at that time were speaking for you and were sort of taking a bit of a creative risk, and in some cases tackling some rather taboo subjects, and Brookside delivered on that. Now, it was scripted by Phil Redmond, who was already in good standing with my age group, I think, through Grange Hill. It's been interesting to revisit them, and we go right back to the beginning, and it's sort of aged pretty well. I mean, obviously there are aspects of it. I think you even do get one of those attitudes of its time, etc., warnings with it. Aspects of it are of its time. Now, in some ways, that's not necessarily a problem. That's Brookside was upfront in tackling with issues of that time. So the first inhabitants of the close you meet, central to the thing with the Grant family. So there's parents Bobby and Sheila, and Bobby being played by Ricky Tomlinson. I mean, I believe this is kind of in keeping with the actor's own history. He plays this sort of classic shop steward, quite militant sort of character. His wife, Sheila, is one of, I think it became a bit of a theme in Brookside, a sort of very, very devout Catholic. I don't know if you could say matriarch, but the mother of the family is very devoutly Catholic, which over the course of certain storylines, I suppose, did present a tension with other family members, conflicting interests to that. So, you've immediately got the potential for a certain amount of conflict already, before we even factor in their sons. Now, the younger son, Damon, he's presented in the early episodes as a bit of a, sort of lovable tearaway. He's not a bad lad, but he's, right from the start, it's evident that he's capable of getting into scrapes. And his elder brother Barry, who was the one who turned out to be, the more long-standing character of that family. And while Barry sort of comes over in the early episodes as the more level-headed elder brother to Damon, it's fairly quickly apparent that there are dark currents to Barrier, that he is indeed capable of violence. Now, the writers, I think, throughout the series also tended to write in contrast to the sort of, I suppose, grittier working class Liverpudlian families who find themselves resident on the close. So by contrast, there also tends to be a more upper class, or at least a more middle class element, and that this also has served as a cause of that all important conflict and tension within the storylines. Now, in the early episodes, the middle class family, I mean, they're presented as kind of having sort of fallen on rather lean times and had to settle for less than they were used to in moving into Brookside. And this is the Collinses. So there's the father, Paul, who's the sort of classic uptight, I don't know if he's ex-army, but he's got that manner about him. He's the kind of classic uptight upper middle class Englishman. He's all about the chunky cardigans and the cravats, and it's immediately apparent he's the huffy type. So the Collins' introduction is there's Paul, there's his wife Annabelle, and the kids Gordon and Lucy, and their welcome to Brookside Close is some freeform vandalism, which Damon and his mates are heavily implicated in this. So they turn up to the house having sort of left the sort of plusher surroundings that they were used to. Lucy has been pulled out of her posh school and sort of landed, she's a bit of a square peg in the local comp. So that they roll up at Brookside to find that probably Damon and his mates have vandalised the house. I don't know why I'm laughing, it's not very nice. So the room that turns out to be Gordon's bedroom has been decorated with... There's a lot of graffiti in the early episodes. So this featuring such pearls as Scouse Power and... bollocks. So yeah, that's and I think they've fucked around with the water pipes as well. So there's this flooding. So this causes, there's an immediate confrontation between Paul and the Grants, which almost turns to fisticuffs. I think the mothers of the families, Sheila and Annabelle, they almost collaborate as peacemakers in this situation. But there's this evident instant tension between the sort of uptight upper middle class types, I suppose more saltier locals. And who else? There's a lot of symptoms of, I think the writers of the time, possibly in what they felt constituted edgy television, was a lot of arguments, right? I mean, there's a lot of disagreement and just a lot of rowing in these early episodes, not least from, I suppose they're another of these kind of middle-class families. They drive a 2CV. It brings back things I'd kind of forgotten, your kind of middle-class 2CV owners. This is Heather and Roger, who are just this kind of living argument. There's just the dialogue between them is just a lot of, they just bitch at each other and shout at each other. Mostly Roger, actually. He's an absolute miserable arse. Although he kind of has what came to be known as almost the classic Scouser look. It was the kind of, you're not quite sure if it's a bubble, if it's a perm or just his naturally curly hair, but he's got this sort of dark, slightly curly hair. And he's got that sort of squaddy-looking moustache that actually a lot of men had at that time. It was, it was just a fairly standard look, but it kind of, as the series went on, it kind of became identifiable as this kind of Scouse look. But he actually has this kind of BBC-ish type accent, and the understanding he has this sort of rather middle-classish occupation or so. I forget what he does, but the two of them just constant rowing. I mean, from what I recall, he's not long for the series. Who else? There's the couple, I forget their names, and I've completely forgotten about them actually, but they got this, I think it's a Cortina. I'd forgotten about this as well, a thing from the time that if you were a young couple, the guy's car would have top of the windscreen, there'd be this kind of coloured see-through, it'd be sort of green or blue, this band along the top of the windscreen with his name over the driver's seat and his girlfriend's name over the passenger seat. I completely forgot that people did that. When did that stop? Anyway, it's full of these things that you kind of look at and think, oh God, yeah. The other thing is anoraks. Right, I mean, that's a kind of a lost item of wardrobe. You just don't see these classic anoraks anymore. I mean, watch these episodes, you'll see what I mean. It's like half the cast are wearing these polyester or, artificial fabric anoraks. And there's an interesting variety of them. I mean, they've vanished almost as a garment. That and there's a few sort of sheepskinny looking and, 3/4 length leather coat. So it's an interesting insight into the fashion crimes of the period. The reason I'm banging on about Brookside, that obviously I'm quite excited to see it back, but I've already covered one. There was the notebooks or the memoirs of David Bing Crosby from the 90s phase of the series. There were numerous spin-off books from Brookside, of which I have acquired more. Now, I'm not going to go into anyone in particular now. I think I'll sort of treat them as their own little episodes, but it generated a huge amount of literature over the years. Well, not a huge amount, but there was a number of books associated with it, of which I have acquired more. You can see the little logo on the back there. I'm not going to give away now what they are, but I think all these are written by Rachel Braverman, who wrote the Bing Crosby one. So I shall call it Bookside. And this will involve, I mean, there's no avoiding it. It will involve really shit impersonations of the Liverpool accent from me. All right. Now, I would like it to be understood that this is done in tribute rather than I'm not taking the piss. So now all of us will have our favourite storylines and our favourite characters and our favourite episodes and our favourite moments. Now, with this thing loading up only a few episodes a week, some of those will take a long time to come round to. One that stuck in my mind, and I thought it was some quite clever writing in this one. It was a 90s one, and what happened with Brookside is that the kind of archetype of the working class Liverpudlian male became such a familiar, I won't say cliche, but a certain type was portrayed in Brookside, which was, I sort of mentioned that look of the bubble perm and the moustache and, either tracky, sports gear or a shell suit, and this kind of slightly volatile temperament, which we presented in certain characters over the series. But this archetype, I think around the turn of the 90s, it was lampooned in a comedy show. I think it was the Harry Enfield show, where they ran a sequence which was obviously very heavily based on Brookside, and it was called The Scousers, right? And it featured Barry, Teddy and Gary, and they all kind of looked identical, and they every kind of little skit they would get into, it would start with something fairly mundane, but I suppose a joke on the volatile temperaments of the archetype concerned. It would flare up into this silly confrontation between them, and then this one of them would then take it on himself to act as the peacemaker. So you got this whole hey, calm down kind of routine with it. It was pretty formulaic, and I think it ran for a few years. I'm pretty sure it was Harry Enfield. But anyway, so this happens while Brookside is still running, is still a popular series. At a certain point, it was a storyline in which the resident kind of yuppie of the time, Maxi Farnam, he'd had a disagreement with his partner at that time. I forget if it was Patricia or it might have been Susanna, who was his first wife, who I think he got back with. But anyway, he's been caught out in some way. I don't know if he was playing away from home or whatever, but that's not important. The important thing was that either Susanna or Patricia, I think probably Susanna, she as revenge just takes the scissors to his wardrobe while he's out. So all his nice, he was big on the shoulder padded double breasted jackets and all this, the kind of yuppie wear of the 90s, if you care to remember that particular period of style abomination. But anyway, she shreds all this. So all he can find to wear in the back of a box in the garage, he finds a tracksuit top, right? And he's obviously a bit uncomfortable wearing it, but he's got no choice. So he wanders out into the street wearing this tracksuit top, and he's spotted by, I think it's Terry, Sinbad, maybe Sinbad's there, I can't remember. Pretty sure Terry was there, maybe Barry. They see him wearing this kind of shell suit top. So then it is, I mean, sort of genius piece of postmodernism, I suppose, that the writers threw into it. They break into this Harry Enfield Scousers routine. So they're going, hey, Maxi, hey, calm down, calm down. I just thought that was so great and so clever and so funny. But it'll be full of little moments like that. You know, if you're a fan, you'll probably have your own. Yes, I'm glad to have the opportunity to see it again, and when I get round to it, I shall be discussing the contents of these